Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast, Securing the Office 365 Universe, sponsored by Avanan. I'm Tracy Cook with Redmond Magazine, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Before we begin, let me take care of a few housekeeping details. Please feel free to type your questions into the Ask a Question box on the console at any time during the presentation. We'll address as many of your questions as we can during the live event, and the entire webcast is being recorded and will be archived for future viewing. We'll send you an email when the replay is available, and that should be in approximately 24 to 48 hours, and you can access the replay using the same link you used today. And now, on to the webcast. We have two excellent speakers joining us today. Coming up a little later is Michael Landaway, co-founder of Avanan, the cloud security platform. He has been an early employee of multiple high-growth startups, including most recently Forescout, Silicon Valley's most recent unicorn IPO. So welcome, Michael. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tracy.
Sure. And starting us off today is John Linkus. He is the founder and CEO of Interpoint Group, a security and compliance advisory group that is a trusted information security consultant to mid-market and Fortune 500 enterprises. So welcome, John.
Thank you, Tracy.
You can take it away.
Thanks. Great, thank you, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. So our presentation today is around security orchestration for the Office 365 Cloud. Before we get into that, I'd like to take just a moment to talk a little bit about Interpoint Group, who we are, and how hopefully our presentation is relevant to today's discussion. As Tracy mentioned, we're an information security consulting firm. We're a peer services firm. We're not a VAR. We're not a systems integrator or an MSSP. And we're also hands-on. Unlike other organizations, perhaps some of your traditional management consulting type firms, we do both the analysis and the hands-on implementation as well. And we're also a completely commercial client base. Our customers primarily come from verticals including financial services, healthcare, retail, some of the others, as you can see there on screen, education, logistics, engineering, aerospace. What we do is to help organizations with the full stack of information security. And so for us, that includes everything from starting out with greenfield and right-sizing information security programs, assisting organizations with security risk and compliance strategy, policy standards development. We do have several areas in which we do very deep dive consulting, incident response, identity and access management, and of course, cloud security strategy, which is really the crux of today's discussion as it relates to the Office 365 ecosystem. And as I said, we focus on practical and pragmatic information security. For us, what that means is that pragmatic really means that we realize that there are oftentimes more than one solution to a problem, and we do what's really right for the particular client, not necessarily what a sort of more rigid approach to information security would entail. So that's enough about me. Let's talk about what we're here to discuss today, which is the Microsoft Office 365 ecosystem. For those of you who've never seen that diagram on screen, which is the periodic table of Office 365, I certainly wish I could take credit for it, but Matt Wade actually put that together. The URL is on screen there if you'd like to get a copy yourself. But Office 360, the importance of this Office 365 ecosystem diagram is twofold. Number one, to show you that the Office 365 environment that Microsoft has established is incredibly complex in a positive sense. It provides more productivity tools than can really be found in any other solution out there, and they're very tightly integrated together, unlike other platforms where there's really a separate say, word processing platform, and then a separate mail platform, and then a separate file sharing platform that are maybe linked together just by single sign-on. The Office 365 environment is extremely integrated and cohesive in terms of how it allows users to exchange information not only with themselves through different applications, but with other people within their team and third parties as well. The benefits to that are huge. Not only can Office 365 give organizations and individuals access to their information anywhere, but from an organizational perspective, it's helpful because it yields predictable costs. You pay per user. You're not having to maintain a tremendous amount of infrastructure. There's no more need for having your own SharePoint file server inside the firewall or your own Microsoft project server that's dedicated. There's increased IT efficiency as a result of that, and it also enables certain types of technologies that weren't as easy to enable in a more traditional on-premise environment, including mobile. So I'm sure there's nothing here that I'm telling anyone on the call today that they're not already aware of, but the reality is that Office 365 does provide these tremendous capabilities and benefits. However, there's a downside to that, and that is the security risks that exist within the cloud. Although Microsoft does an incredibly good job of information security compared to not just other platform vendors in the cloud, but really compared to many other organizations in general, they spend over $1 billion a year on security R&D. And for the Office 365 platform specifically, they've gone through the process of getting a lot of critical technical validation and certification on a lot of security credentials, including ISO 27000 standards, 001 and 018, the AICPA SSAE 16 certification. But the reality is that, like with any platform, there are still potential security issues, particularly when you have an environment like Office 365 where there's a tremendous amount and capability to exchange information between the different applications as well as with other users. Some of those are the same types of security issues that we ran into on the on-premise side. Obviously, malware still continues to be a problem. Just because Office 365 is sitting in the cloud, it doesn't make organizations immune from viruses, worms, or Trojans. Another critical issue is sensitive information leakage. And the reason for this one is really that your SaaS, when you adopt Office 365, basically becomes an extension to your data center. It really extends out your network perimeter to encapsulate your chunk of the Office 365 environment. And just as was the case when your servers and other IT assets were inside of your firewall, sensitive information can still leak out of that environment, whether it's Social Security numbers or cardholder data or PII data. If you are dealing with nations, for example, that have to comply with the GDPR regulation, where there are a lot of major penalties in the European Union nations if that personal data on employees is leaked out, that can be really, really critical, and that's still an issue. Also, of course, insider threats. So just as when our infrastructure was inside the firewall, if a workstation or an endpoint is compromised, that attacker is going to get access to everything that user sees. And in the cloud world, if that compromised account is a cloud administrator or someone who has elevated privileges within the cloud, then it's really game over at that point, because that malicious attacker can do things that affect not only that user but other users as well. The good news is that as part of all of that security spending that Microsoft makes every year, one of the things that they've recently developed within the past year and a half is something called Office 365 Secure Score. So we're gonna delve in a little bit into Secure Score, what the tool is and what it does. But essentially, Office 365 Secure Score is available to every administrator of an Office 365 group account. And so if you are the IT manager or the CISO or the CIO at an organization, you can go to, and you've subscribed to Office 365 for your employees, you can go to securescore.office.com, and at no additional charge, you can get an overview of what your security score is for your environment. The best part about Office 365 Secure Score is that it works across all of those Office 365 services. It's not limited just to, say, Outlook or SharePoint. Really works across the entire environment and provides some really great detailed information about what your security risk posture is, and also identifies for you a very easy to read metric, which is a security score. This security score basically represents how many controls or percentage of controls that you have implemented across the environment. Now, when we look at the secure score from within the application itself, as I said, it represents your cloud security posture within your organization. And it also identifies specific security and privacy controls that you can implement to reduce risk. Best of all, those are prioritized, and they're based on best practice recommendations in terms of which of these are going to reduce risk the most. If you look at some of the secure score controls and recommendations, and I've listed several over on the right, you can see that they're actually broken down into different categories of security control and security protection. So, for example, there are data protection controls that are really focused on things like DLP, the loss of data, making sure that you've got a strong outbound spam policy so that your own email servers are not being used and your email accounts are not being used to generate spam. Making sure that mailbox auditing is enabled and mobile devices are enabled to manage email profiles to ensure the security and protection of email accounts and data. Another category are advanced threat protection, or ATP controls. So these are controls relating to things like policy classifications for different types of sites, document tagging, ATP protections for attachments and links. In other words, making sure that things like safe link following is enabled, and making sure that attachment monitoring is enabled, so that when inbound attachments come in, that they're evaluated to make sure that there's no malware within them or malicious macros, for example. Another category would be authentication controls, requiring things like strong passwords and defining password reset frequency. And, of course, access controls, who is allowed to access certain types of things, who can access calendars and third-party integrated applications. Now, these four categories that I just happened to pick out of the group of secure score security control requirements are only a very small section of all of the controls that are available within Microsoft Secure Score. And there are additional categories above and beyond these individual controls. My point in talking about these is showing you that with Secure Score, it's using it as really a combination of a checklist and a dashboard to show you what your current level of security posture across the organization is incredibly helpful. Now, also, when you look at some of these controls, you may notice something. Some of them are things that can really have to be done manually and perhaps only need to be done once. Things like enabling strong password complexity or enabling passwords to be reset every 60 days. Those are automated capabilities that can be built into AD within the Azure Cloud or within Office 365 itself. And of course, these are the same types of controls that could be implemented on-premise systems as well. But others are really related to monitoring, continuously monitoring information that is ingressing into and egressing out of the environment. And that's particularly true for things like the ATP and data protection controls that exist within the environment. And so when you're doing this and you're implementing these security controls, many of these things, not all of them, but many of them can be implemented for you automatically within Office 365. And in fact, from within Security Score itself, it tells you exactly where to go within your Office 365 cloud instance to enable these protections. But there's always a catch, and that catch is, well, what happens if some of these controls are going to be implemented by a third-party tool? For example, It's great that Microsoft provides a DLP capability, but that may not be the DLP solution that you want to use, the one that's built into Office 365. You may need something that requires more granular control and notification for DLP, and you're using a third-party tool to do that. Well, as you're doing that, one of the great things that SecureScore allows you to do is identify when you're using a third-party control. So, for example, for DLP, and this is a verbatim recommendation out of SecureScore, enable data loss prevention policies, you as an organization can actually go in and click on third party. And what that will do within SecureScore is say, okay, great, we now know that this control is in place. Even though Microsoft Office 365 isn't managing it, it's still there and it's still available to us. Another thing that can be done within SecureScore is telling it whether a particular control applies or not. Why is that useful? Well, because not all of the security controls that SecurityScore recommends are going to be applicable to your environment. So, for example, as we go back to the last screen, let's say, for example, that do not allow third-party integrated applications. Well, if you don't have any third-party integrated applications that you're supporting, you can simply disable that or say that, hey, that doesn't apply. The great thing about SecureScore is that it really provides you with a valid representation of your actual security posture within your Office 365 environment, and that's very, very helpful. Now, as you might have seen from us talking about SecureScore, a lot of what you have to do within SecureScore relies on manual configurations or automatically setting up third-party tools and technologies to do things that go above and beyond what Office 365 does. And so now I want to talk a little bit about the meat of today's discussion, which is security orchestration. So when we say security orchestration, what are we really talking about? Well, security orchestration is essentially the layer that sits on top of all of your information security tools within your environment. It coordinates those security tools. It allows them to communicate through the security orchestration layer using a common language. And that security orchestration layer then provides a couple of critical capabilities. First off, it connects different security tools together. And what that means ultimately is that it has to be vendor agnostic or at least support a very large ecosystem of different vendors out there. It's got to not tie just to one particular technology or product. Number two, it has to be able to integrate disparate security systems. Security has to be viewed as a single ecosystem. So it really needs to tie together your anti-malware tools and controls with your DLP tools and controls, with your identity governance tools and controls, and other types of security technologies that you have within your environment, and bring all of those together into a single ecosystem or a single view of security across the environment. Third, it has to be able to streamline security processes. So just as security tools provide automation, security orchestration goes beyond simple automation and really actually provides streamlining of security processes and ties back all of the information that it captures into specific security objectives for example, specific risk reduction activities. And finally, going back to the subject of automation, it really powers your automated tools. It automates low-risk, high-volume operations and transactions, meaning that things that would have to be done every day, for example, analysis of information coming into or out of the environment, such as going out through email, it certainly is going to work with those security tools to ingest the DLP tools to ingest that data, but then it's going to be able to provide some intelligence around that to determine whether or not a specific action should be taken. It's also going to facilitate that common language among different security systems. So it's going to standardize things like risk ratings and response procedures so that when your anti-malware tool tells you that something is going on and it's absolutely critical and it's sounding an alarm, and your DLP tool or some other tool is looking at the same information and is telling you, hey, this is actually not that big of a deal, the security orchestration layer is what really creates the common lingua franca between those. And then finally, as any good security orchestration technology does, it needs to maintain the human interaction at key decision points. So when it comes to something critical, like, hey, it looks like we're getting, DDoS. Do we need to contact our DDoS mitigation vendor, spin up, dark fiber or whatever other connective mechanism they have for either getting additional bandwidth or offloading their existing bandwidth? That's the kind of decision that only a human being should be making. And so a security orchestration tool is there to provide you with the information, but not really to make the decision for you. Digging down a little bit further into security orchestration and particularly around automation, that automation process or all processes within security orchestration need to be really three things. Number one, they need to be intelligent, meaning they need to be able to implement the right controls. They need to be targeted to the right assets. And finally, they need to be optimized, meaning that the information that they're providing has to be something that can actually be useful and can actually be used by the person who's looking at it. It has to be actionable. Finally, those cloud security orchestration tools have to be able to easily consumable through self-provisioning, meaning that if an effective security orchestration tool has to be able to do those integration points with third-party security tools that it manages and controls very, very easily. It can't be something that requires custom coding or anything like that to connect. It has to be scalable, and the primary reason for that, of course, as we all know, smaller organizations, SMB and mid-market, have to deal with the exact same threats that enterprise organizations have to do. The difference is, unlike the big organizations, they generally don't have the budgets necessary to be able to protect against those threats. So it absolutely has to scale not only up but also down. As I mentioned, integration not only with existing technologies, but also with processes. And finally, again, it has to be able to provide that actionable data to information to decision makers. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Office 365 security protections, for a number of years now, Microsoft has had a capability in Office 365 called Exchange Online Protection, or EOP. Well, at Microsoft's Ignite conference back in October, Microsoft made a pretty significant announcement that they are now introducing something called Microsoft Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection, or ATP. This was just recently announced, and the ATP service really provides a couple of key capabilities. It provides things like anti-phishing. It provides safe attachment and safe link support. It provides spoofing intelligence for emails to help determine whether they are spoofed or not. It provides a quarantine box for potentially dangerous assets that make it into the environment. So the question becomes, well, is that really what security orchestration is? And what I've done is I've built a little table over on the right that kind of shows, the degree to which Microsoft ATP implements some of those core requirements of a security orchestration solution. Certainly, it does a great job of connecting to Microsoft tools. What it doesn't do, unfortunately, is provide you with the ability to swap out other components. For example, the only anti-phishing capability that you can use with Microsoft ATP is Microsoft's anti-phishing capability. The only quarantine area that you can, or quarantine capability that you get, is the one that Microsoft provides. So it does connect and does interact those tools together. Unfortunately, it doesn't break out of that ecosystem box. The second one, integrating disparate security systems. Again, it covers some Office 365 services, but at this point today, it does not cover all Microsoft Office 365 services. Just as it's sort of a natural evolution. Microsoft Exchange Online Protection basically provided support specifically for Exchange and Outlook, but Microsoft ATP really covers a lot more, but still doesn't get to the full stack of all of those Microsoft Office 365 applications. No one can question that it certainly streamlines security processes, so it gets full credit for that. But again, powering automation, it scales well, but what it doesn't do is really deliver on that common security language or the human interaction at key decision points that we talked about that are critical for security orchestration. And so to that point, Does this qualify as security orchestration? I don't think it does today. We're getting there, but we're not quite there yet. And so for that reason, it's important to look to other technologies and products in the market that can deliver real security orchestration for the Office 365 platform. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Thanks, John. And again, my name is Michael Landaway. I'm a co-founder of Avanan, the cloud security platform. And what I'd like to do is take John's discussion about the requirements needed to protect your Office 365 environment and describe how the Avanan cloud security platform can actually address those each at a time. So for those that are not familiar with us as a company, we are a true cloud security platform because we protect all SaaS beyond Office 365. And we offer not only centralized policy management and centralized reporting, but also a complete security stack that covers everything from phishing to malware to access control and SIM integration. So it is a full stack of security, but for the cloud. Now, the cloud security challenge is that it's bigger than your data center. It expands your attack surface. And the threats are threats that are unfamiliar to us if we just have data center experience, in that our users are now empowered to maybe approve SaaS that you may not like. You may have data connections between different SaaS solutions. You're going to be collaborating with third-party partners, customers, through the cloud, so you have approved and unapproved collaboration connections that are a security threat. So it's a much bigger problem to solve. Avanan was designed to solve this problem, which is why we feel very empowered to be able to solve the Office 365 security challenge. Office 365, yes, it's one cloud provided by one provider, Microsoft, but in essence, it's actually multiple clouds. You might share the same admin credentials, but your data is being stored in different formats. Your data is being shared in different ways. It's going to connect seamlessly or not so seamlessly between different Office products. So our ability to manage a large-scale cloud environment makes us scale very easily to the Office 365 security challenge. So what I'd like to do is kind of address those bullet points that John went through when it comes to security orchestration for Office 365. When we talk about cloud security, it's easier to put it into categories of visibility, compliance, data security, and threat protection. Those are all kind of the important pillars of true cloud security. So when it comes to visibility, Avanan gathers that visibility, that insight into what's going on in the Office 365 environment entirely through API connectivity. One, that makes it a very fast deployment, but more importantly, it gives us complete information in that we can see every Microsoft Teams conversation, every Outlook email, every file in OneDrive, et cetera. And we can normalize that information across the Office 365 environment. So an email message can be normalized to, let's say, a Teams message or a Skype message. A file that's an attachment can be normalized to a file that's in OneDrive. That normalization gives us complete information, but it also gives us comprehensive control, the ability to affect change within that environment in a way that's context sensitive. So we gather all that information and provide a single pane of glass that by design gathers all the information across multiple SaaS. Fortunately, that gives you that same visibility across all of your Office 365 environments. So in those four pillars of cloud security, that complete visibility gives us 100% visibility into all the data, the files, the users, the policies that you've deployed across your cloud. We can see who's accessing not only your users, but third-party tools or third-party SaaS. not only do we see real-time events, but we also see historical events. So if a bad thing happened today, we'll see it, but if something happened 6 months ago or a year ago, we can also analyze and diagnose that. So that visibility is two-dimensional. In that next category, compliance, primarily data classification, policy control, all of that is done within the Avanan platform. By normalizing all that visible information, we can now report in a single pane and then create automated remediation workflows. So whenever a human gets involved in the remediation of an event, there is not only a cause for error, but also cause for delay and just misuse. By automating that, we can take IT out of that conversation. So DLP events, malware events, all that can be done with a conversation with the user rather than with a conversation with the IT. And then, of course, that centralized reporting that we talked about. You can't have compliance reporting unless it's comprehensive compliance reporting across all of Office 365 rather than just certain silos. Within that compliance category, the big one is data classification, data leakage prevention. And so Microsoft offers their own data classification tool, but it doesn't apply across all Office 365. So looking for classified information going through Teams or going through email or going through Office 365 might require different configurations and different tuning. But more importantly, you're probably already using a data classification tool within your data center and across your network. This is where Avanan sets itself apart in that we have partnered with the top DLP tools to create cloud-based versions of the same code that you might be running in your data center. We make a cloud-based version of that, connect it to your Office 365 environment so that you can apply classification policy across all of the different spheres in Office 365 and make it context sensitive. So instead of just saying allow or deny, it can be context sensitive response as in moving a file to a different place, encrypting a file in a different way, emailing or not allowing an email to go out. So what this does is take that classification tool that you may already be using in the data center, but applying those policies in the cloud from one place. So because we take these cloud-based tools, we take these tools and make them cloud-based. They actually run headless. There's no configuration that needs to be done to the actual tool itself, but it allows you to create those workflows I described based on the classification information. You can take the same policies that you've already deployed, flip a switch, and deploy those same policies across the cloud. You make a change in the policy on your network, and those policies can also apply in your Office 365 environment. So the ability to classify data and then build a workflow around that data, either sending to a vault, alerting an owner, moving a file, encrypting a file, those are all things that can be done in an automated way. Which leads us to the next pillar, and that is data security. If your classification tool determines that a file needs to be encrypted as it leaves or as it's stored within Office 365, normally you might be limited to just Microsoft's encryption. But because we are a platform that can use most any third-party tool, we can take a cloud-based version of that tool so that you can encrypt your files in a way that you may have already deployed across your network. So the next category, when it comes to threat detection, this is where Avanan sets itself apart and describes itself as a true cloud security platform. When it comes to protecting against malware, anywhere from phishing, file sanitization, access control, shadow IT, all the different threats that you might have in your cloud environment, it's addressed in a way that's unique to Avanan. What we've done is we've partnered with over 60 of the major security vendors to take their core technology and create cloudified, zero management versions of their security tools. It's tightly integrated on the Avanan platform so that it's normalized in the same way that we normalize the data across the cloud. So in Office 365, we normalize the user information, the file information, et cetera. But when it comes to the security tools, we also normalize those as well so that you can add and build a security stack using multiple tools today, new tools tomorrow, in order to create a bundled solution that's seamlessly managed. You can pick and choose the tools from the application store in different categories. So instead of just being one type of technology, we offer traditional signature-based antivirus, malware sandboxing, advanced AI malware detection, and so on. So that when we scan files going in and out of Office 365 or across between users in Office 365, we can scan it not only for confidential information but also for malware so that an infection does not spread. The reason why we offer so many different tools is that if we look, kind of drill down into a kind of a typical event period, we can see that we have multiple security solutions deployed, anywhere from FireEye to Sophos to Checkpoint to Silence and GTB. And you'll notice that the detection rates are actually different. That when a piece of malware or a confidential file comes through, one tool might do a better job than another when it comes to detecting that information. When it comes to DLP, it may be because some offer OCR and others don't. Others may be better qualified for monitoring HIPAA information versus PCI. But when it comes to malware, it's actually very expected. When we drill down into one of the events, we can actually see here's an example file that was scanned by multiple tools, scanned by Checkpoint, signature-based antivirus, and it passed, which means it thought it was an okay file. It was scanned by malware sandboxing tools from Checkpoint and Palo Alto. One said it was okay, the other found something nefarious. It was scanned by Solabit and Silence, two AI malware detection tools, and those detected as well. So what this means is that multi-technology scanning for DLP or for malware is more effective when we can use third-party tools. We can see here, just in an average period, that malware sandboxing caught 79% of the malware during that period. It was more than any others, but not 100%. By adding additional layers, we can catch more of the malware. In fact, as we get down to some of the more advanced tools from behavior analysis and anomaly detection, we can actually catch that last little bit that normally gets through typical malware solutions. Email is a good example of how we differentiate from kind of the built-in tools that Office 365 offers. Office 365 actually has those two different security categories: the default that everyone benefits from, and then the advanced threat protection that's an additional cost for additional capabilities. But because Avanan can leverage the tools from so many different vendors, we can monitor and check each email with literally hundreds of different checkpoints in order to offer the most complete security solution for email. And the same is true across the rest of the cloud. So that when we look at those pillars of cloud security, there's really no comparison when it comes to the threat protection, because we are actually bringing the full force of the security industry to threat protection within Office 365. So when we look at the Office 365 security challenge, it is a large one that requires the ability to, one, monitor all of those connections, internal connections, external connections, third-party connections, those connections between the different Office 365 tools. And that's something that Avanan does. The ability to apply security tools at each one of those connection points, being able to monitor for confidential information, encrypt confidential information as it passes through, monitoring for malware as it's sent between trusted users or untrusted users. One of the categories of things that does require that comprehensive visibility is the insider threat. There really is no single off-the-shelf product to solve the problem of the insider threat because it is a comprehensive problem. It requires monitoring and normalizing event information, historical and real time, from all over, not only Office 365, but any other third-party SaaS. Avanan analyzes all of that event information using AI and machine learning, using the instant event history that we get when we connect. So not only do we see information in real time, we can actually look at a user's past, look at login behavior, event behavior, and identify anomalous behavior based upon a long history without actually having to be there for that period of time. And because we can monitor simultaneously all across Office 365, we can actually, and across any other SaaS that we might be connected to, we can actually see that insider threat or that account takeover threat before it even reaches Office 365. The reason why account takeover protection requires such comprehensive information is because the threats come in from different directions. And the ability to have that comprehensive visibility, we can stop it at each point in the attack chain. So now I'd like to go back to John's analysis of security for Office 365 and note that Avanan provides the security tools. We are a vendor-agnostic security tool that works with Microsoft Security. So you're not replacing it. You're working with Microsoft Security, but also 60 other vendors. We integrate different security systems so we can share events and normalize events across the Office 365 cloud, across multiple SaaS, and feed those into your existing SIEM solution. We automate and streamline the security processes so that you can build a single architecture to wrap over Office 365 and your other SaaS so that we can automate all the high-volume threat issues that normally overwhelm an IT team. Our goal is to orchestrate, automate, and because we can provision in just a few minutes, we can scale from small to large, we can solve big problems very quickly. And then when it comes to that orchestration, when it comes to that compliance reporting, we can provide that actionable data based upon real information. So finally, just to compare, the choice when it comes to increasing your security score. If you use the manual process within Office 365, it is a good set of tools. However, only Avanan gives you that comprehensive solution that instead of just offering Microsoft tools for security, we offer the industry's top technology, integrating all of Office 365 in one environment, and then beyond that, all your cloud, your Amazon, your Azure, your Googles, and so forth, in one environment, so that we can streamline security events across all of those so that you can automate policies from one pane of glass, remediate automatically to take IT out of the event stream, but then provide real-time compliance enforcement, not just reporting after the fact, but monitoring, responding, and reporting in real time. So you can see that Microsoft has done a great job of adding layers of security. However, they are not a security company. In fact, no one company can be the best at all things. That's our philosophy, which is why we partnered with all the major security vendors to build that security stack to run headless within our cloud security platform. And in order to prove that and demonstrate that, I'd like to offer everyone that's on the call a free Office 365 security scan, kind of see the value we can offer checking your existing files or emails for confidential information, scanning for events that might have slipped through the cracks, looking for malware or other threats to your network. If you go to avanan.com/Redmond, we'd love to help you out. So I think we are to the point where we'd like to answer questions. And so, Tracy, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. Great presentation. And John, thank you too. We have quite a few questions from the audience, so I guess I'll get right to it. First we have, I'm going to combine a couple questions into one, and that would be, when integrating all those security products into my Office 365 environment, do I need to have a license for each of them? And then further, do I need to have them installed in my database?
So the answer to that question is no. We are a cloud-based platform. We have partnered with these third-party tools to cloudify their product so it runs headless within our environment. We manage all of the deployment, scaling, licensing, implementation, and so on. So it's totally independent of what you have in your data center. You need to do no management of the tool itself. Everything is done via kind of a one-click security as a service within the platform.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to encourage the audience to put in some more questions. We have a little bit of time today. And then here's the next question. How does this work with my existing reporting tools?
That's a great question. In fact, that goes to the security orchestration philosophy. So our platform, like I said, it collects and normalizes all the information that's coming from the cloud. So every user, every event, every piece of file information, everything that's happened within the cloud, we collect and normalize in one place. We also collect and normalize all the event data that might come from the security tools. So if Advanced Threat Protection says something, that gets collected and normalized. If our Semantic or Checkpoint product measures something, we collect that information. And then we can not normalize and collect it obviously within our dashboard, but more importantly, we can stream that to your existing reporting system. In fact, it's very possible to not need to use our interface for your compliance reporting and just use it as within your existing SIEM. In fact, the philosophy there is that you can now treat all the applications within Office 365 as if they are just another data center in your environment.
Okay, very good. And again, I'm going to combine a few questions together. And it would be, what if I already have ATP deployed? What if I already have another security tool deployed?
Absolutely. In fact, many of our customers are already using ATP. Many of our customers are already using, for example, email security like Mimecast or Proofpoint or some sort of CASB solution. So one, because of the way we deploy via API, we're totally out of band. We're not rerouting traffic. We're not rerouting users. So we don't interfere with those third-party solutions you might have deployed. And many of our customers, like I said, are already using Advanced Threat Protection. Those are additional layers of security that we would support. We would never ask somebody to remove a layer of security. Now, granted, some might find the layers of security that we provide redundant with what their existing security layers offer. But the key thing is that we're the only way to add additional layers of security because of the way we deploy.
Okay, very nice. We have some more coming in, and let's see. How do Interpoint Group and Avanan capabilities work together?
So we are. I'll answer very quickly, and then turn it over to John. So the quick answer is that we are security as a service. We are a product, a cloud-based product. We don't provide services, and that is where John comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. So Interpoint Group is as an information security services consulting company, where we can assist organizations is first off in helping them to identify what types, if they're interested in licensing Avanan, helping them to figure out which particular services should be enabled, helping them to figure out where they may have existing defense in depth security controls in place already, and helping them to basically make sure that when they do go with Avanan as a solution, that they're enabling the right products and the right capabilities within the Avanan security orchestration platform to get the greatest level of risk reduction and meet their security objectives.
Very nice. Here we go. What privileged account management solutions or partners have been used or leveraged as part of your overall security architecture for cloud services?
I'm sorry. I was confused by the question.
Okay.
And so, yeah, sorry. So, so when it comes to there are actually two answers to that question. When it comes to privileged account management, we offer some of those capabilities ourselves just by where we sit in the environment and the information that we gather. Then when it comes to offering capabilities that we don't offer, that's where the third-party tools come in. In fact, in many cases, we are actually integrating with the PAM system that our customer already has. The real value we have is that because we're API built, we can integrate with either tools that you don't have by spinning up a cloud-based version of it, or integrating with the PAM solutions or other third-party solutions that you already have. And by having that comprehensive information that we do, we can actually make those tools better.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Here's another one. Do you identify roles or devices?
Yes. So the answer to that is yes. So we actually have different levels of information about that endpoint. One is what we know built in, based upon the information provided us by their login connection, either via single sign-on or directly to the cloud. But we've also partnered with endpoint compliance companies in order to capture even more information about that endpoint. So by default, we know where somebody's coming in from, how somebody's coming in, by what path, by what authentication mechanism. But then by partnering, we can also provide endpoint information about the compliance of that endpoint.
Okay. Thank you. Have a couple more here. Let me see which one we should do. How do you secure and ensure your solution doesn't become one vulnerable entry point into all of your client environments?
So that's a very legitimate question. In fact, that is something that we address very aggressively. And so we sell to some of the world's largest financial organizations, banks, government organizations, and by then we measure ourselves, not only with our own tools, but with third-party tools. Most everything we do is within either the Amazon or Azure environment. So we get all the benefit of those levels of security, especially those levels of security that the governments need, like a FedRAMP environment. So that ability that we have to connect gives us a lot of information, but the most important thing is that we're only keeping metadata. So while we might scan a file for confidential information, we actually don't have that confidential information. We just have the metadata about whether it passed or failed and by what metric it passed or failed. So even if our database was compromised, there would just be metadata information about the files. No actual confidential information is stored within our environment.
Michael, if I could piggyback onto that for a second, one additional thing I think is important to put out is that, if you look at the Microsoft Office 365 environment or Azure or AWS, really any other environment out there, particularly at the SaaS-based environments like Salesforce.com, for example. Statistically, if you look at the security controls that those vendors implement, they're implementing them uniformly for everyone, and B, they're actually in many, if not most cases, more stringent and more effective out of box than what a lot of organizations have if they're managing their own security. Not to say that things in the cloud are necessarily more secure than behind the corporate firewall, but again, statistically, if you look out there, the reality is that a lot of organizations have got more substantial gaps in their security protections for their on-premise stuff and at their own internal perimeter than what exists in the cloud today. So while it's certainly possible that, as we pointed out today, that any cloud environment can be breached, just like any on-prem environment can be breached, by implementing that layered security approach and layering on top of the existing incumbent controls that those SaaS and cloud vendors put out there, you're in probably as good, if not better, protection than what exists inside the corporate firewall.
Very nice. It looks like that's about all the time we have today. Michael, do you have anything you want to add before I close out the event, or John?
Well, first I'd like to thank you, Tracy, and thank you, everyone. There were actually quite a few questions that we did not get to, and we will answer those individually. And so, John, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Well, we really appreciate you, Michael and John, for your presentation and taking time to be with us today. Really appreciate it. And before I close out the event, I'd like to encourage everyone to request the free scan of the Office 365 environment at avanan.com/Redmond. And you can see that on your console there. Michael had mentioned it earlier. And so I'd like to thank the audience for attending today's webcast. The webcast was sponsored by Avanan and presented by Redmond Magazine. Thanks again, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
You may now disconnect.